no longer looks like a city at war in the way that it was 3 years ago. The shops are open and commuters get delayed in traffic jams on their way to work. But in the days since 12th of February this year, when US President Donald Trump rang Russia's Vladimir Putin to send a 90-minute political embrace from the White House to the Kremlin, 2022's old nightmares of national extinction have returned. Ukrainians used to get angry about the way that President Joe Biden held back weapons systems and restricted the way Ukraine used the ones that arrived here. Even so, they knew whose side he was on. Instead, Donald Trump has delivered a stream of exaggeration, half-truths, and outright lies about the war that echo the views of President Putin. They include his dismissal of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator who does not deserve a seat at the table when America and Russia decide the future of his country. The biggest lie Trump has told is that Ukraine started the war. Trump's negotiating strategy is to offer concessions even before serious talks have started. Instead of putting pressure on the country that broke international law by invading its neighbor, leading to huge destruction and hundreds of thousands of dead and wounded, he has turned on Ukraine. His public statements have offered Russia important concessions, declaring that Ukraine will not join NATO and accepting that it will keep at least some of the land it seized by force. Vladimir Putin's record shows he respects strength. He regards concessions as a sign of weakness. He has not budged from a demand for even more Ukrainian land than his men now occupy. Immediately after the first talks, held in Saudi Arabia, between Russia and the U.S. since the 2022 invasion, Putin's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov repeated his demand that no NATO troops would be allowed into Ukraine to provide security guarantees. A veteran European diplomat who has dealt with the Russians and the Americans told me that when the grizzled, highly experienced Lavrov met Trump's novice Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he would have eaten him like a soft-boiled egg. Challenging times. A few days ago, as Trump threw more insults at Ukraine's president, I went to the heavily guarded government quarter in Kiev to meet Ihor Brusillo, who is a senior advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky and deputy head of his office. Brusillo acknowledged how much pressure Trump is putting on them. It's very, very tough. These are very hard, challenging times, Brusillo said. I wouldn't say that now it's easier than it was in 2022. It's like you live it all over again. Brusillo said Ukrainians and their president were as determined to fight to stay independent as they had been in 2022. We're a sovereign country. We are part of Europe, and we will remain so. Fading colors. In the weeks after Vladimir Putin ordered the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the sound of battle on the edge of Kiev echoed around streets that were almost empty. Checkpoints and barricades, walls of sandbags and tank traps welded from steel girders were rushed out onto Kiev's broad boulevards. At the railway station, 50,000 civilians a day, mostly women and children, were boarding trains going west, away from the Russians. The platforms were packed, and every time a train pulled in, came another surge of panic as people pushed and shoved to get on. In those freezing days, in bitter wind and flurries of snow, it felt as if the colors of the 21st century were fading into an old monochrome newsreel that Europeans had believed until then was safely consigned to the vaults of history. President Zelensky, in Joe Biden's words, didn't want to hear American warnings that an invasion was imminent. Putin rattling a Russian saber was one thing. A full-scale invasion with tens of thousands of troops and columns of armor surely belonged in the past.
While drinking tree sap does not immediately sound appealing, Canadian producers are hoping that it will be the next must-try soft drink around the world. We have all heard of maple syrup, which is made by boiling down the sap of maple trees to produce a thick, sweet, golden to brown colored syrup that is typically poured over pancakes. What is far less well known is that you can drink the sap itself, which is called maple water. Clear in color, it contains just 2% natural sugars, so it is only slightly sweet. A small but growing number of producers in Canada are now selling this maple water in bottles or cartons, after first giving it a filter and pasteurization to kill off any microbes. People feel like they're drinking the wild Canadian forest, says Yannick Leclerc of Maple 3, a producer of maple water drinks, based in Quebec City. Advocates point to the fact it is a natural drink, and makers hope that it can steal some sales from the existing similar product, coconut water. The latter is made from water that naturally forms inside coconuts. As Canada is far and away the world's largest producer of maple syrup, accounting for more than 80% of production, it is understandable that the nascent maple water sector is also Canadian. Furthermore, it is centered on the province of Quebec, which makes 90% of Canada's maple syrup. Mr. Leclerc says that Maple 3 is one of the pioneers of the sector. Nobody, previously, thought about keeping the sap for its hydration purposes versus just boiling it into syrup. He founded the company back in 2013 with business partner Stephen Nollet. In recent years, an increasing number of other producers have entered the marketplace. Mr. Leclerc claims that Maple 3 has doubled its annual profits since 2021, with sales not just rising across Canada, but in 12 other countries, including France, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea. Some 75% of its sales now come from overseas, and it sells both still and sparkling maple water, and fizzy versions with added natural fruit flavorings. It's more than just a local product at this point, adds Mr. Leclerc. For the maple water industry as a whole, one recent report predicts big growth. It estimated that global sales in 2024 totaled $506 million, £409 million, with that expected to jump to $2.6 billion by 2033. By comparison, worldwide sales of coconut water reached $7.7 billion in 2023, with that expected to grow to $22.9 billion by 2029. So maple water has a long way to catch up. Meanwhile, the global value of the maple syrup market was $1.7 billion last year, according to one study. Beth Cherwini, a dietitian with the nonprofit medical center Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, says the growing popularity of maple water is linked to its perceived health benefits. When the sap itself is filtered through the tree, it ends up absorbing a bunch of antioxidants, she says. So they're gonna end up having a better performance and a faster workout recovery. However, one medical study from 2019 concluded that maple water was not superior in rehydration to normal water. Jeremy Kinsella owns the Soda Pop Brothers in Windsor, Ontario, which sells soft drinks under its own brand name, as well as imports from around the world. His family have been in the industry for nearly a century, and in his lifetime he has seen a fair share of trends come and go. He says that if maple water is to go mainstream, it needs the financial backing and promotion of one of the huge global soft drinks firms. It will take a larger soda manufacturer for it to really catch on, he says. Mr. Kinsella also says that the price of maple water is currently too high. When it comes down to it, someone's looking at a can of Coke for $1 and they're looking at a can of maple water for $3, they're going to try it a couple of times and go back to Coke, he says. Marketing maple water more would certainly help it increase sales, says John Tomori, who helps run Pefferlaw Creek Farms in Uxbridge, Ontario. He and his brothers have been making maple syrup commercially for almost 10 years, and for the past 4 they have also been selling the sap to a Canada brand called Sap Sucker. This makes sparkling sap water with different added flavors, from lime to grapefruit and lemon to orange. Mr. Tomori says he agrees with this approach to make the sap more interesting. I know a lot of people have tried just selling the sap as it is, just basic sap from the tree and it's still, but they haven't really caught on, he says.
BMW has confirmed it is delaying the reintroduction of electric vehicle production at its Oxford mini plant. The vehicle manufacturer said multiple uncertainties facing the automotive industry had led to its decision to pause work on the £600 million upgrade of its plant in K.L.P. It said it had decided not to accept a related £60 million grant from the government, but remained in close dialogue. The UK automotive industry has been in a long-running debate with the government over its targets for electric vehicle production. Car makers have argued that the number of electric vehicles they are expected to sell in this and coming years is too high. Earlier this year, the government ran a fast-track consultation on changes to this policy, known as the Zero Emission Vehicle (ZEV) mandate. Last November, Stellantis cited the mandate as one of the reasons it decided to close its van factory in Luton. A statement from Mini owner BMW said, Plant Oxford is at the heart of Mini production, manufacturing, and exporting a range of models, which are sought after in the UK and around the world. However, given the multiple uncertainties facing the automotive industry, the BMW Group is currently reviewing the timing for reintroducing battery electric Mini production in Oxford. It said much of the investment was progressing, with construction well underway to make the plant future-ready, including a project to build new state-of-the-art logistics facility. The statement added, "We have informed the UK government of our decision to review the timeline for reintroducing battery electric production in Oxford. As part of this discussion, we agreed not to take the previously announced grant, but we remain in close dialogue about our future plans." In 2023, BMW announced plans to invest hundreds of millions of pounds to prepare the Mini factory in Oxford to build a new generation of electric cars. Production of 2 new electric Mini models had been due to begin at the plant in 2026. The Department for Transport, DFT, said it recognized the challenges car manufacturers were facing and was listening to concerns. It said it was consulting on reinstating the 2030 electric vehicle deadline while also protecting jobs, a decision it said was supported by a majority of manufacturers who have been working towards this date and are on track to meet their ZEV mandate targets. The DFT said it was investing more than £2.3 billion to support industry and consumers to make the switch to electric.